So I was sitting in a room full of my peers, and we had a guest speaker there from the police department. Um, the conversation got to a point where our guest speaker was talking about how, thankfully, in Canada, we don't experience police violence. That's a thing in the US, and that he doesn't understand why people, some people specifically, he's talking about people of color, have fears when interacting with the police. Um, the only other person of color in the room, my fellow classmate, very politely shared their own experience with police and why they may hesitate when interacting with police, and it was very quickly dismissed. Then an entire room full of white people discussed why and why not minorities should feel this way or that way if these things really happen to people of color. And there were people arguing on both sides. But here I am, while they're discussing hypothetical situations that they could be in, or if this happened to me. These are all things that are, an idea, maybe never a real thing to them. And I'm sitting hearing them talking about real things to me. Yet I felt like there was no room in that space for my voice, and no room for the other person of color in my classroom's voice. There was no space, and I was left feeling really uncomfortable, and really kind of disgusted that people could be discussing my rights when it doesn't apply to them. And it's one thing to have a conversation, but it's another thing to have a conversation about a group of people and not have them as part of the discussion. I ended up not saying anything when this happened, but I wanted to, but it's so discouraging when things like this happen. And I had classmates coming up to me about, what do we do next? What's next? And I know that they were doing this with my best interest in mind. But it's so exhausting to constantly have to be like, hey, this wasn't okay. And then to be expected to also fix the problem. It left me feeling a little bit like a shell, and I didn't want to go to class for like the following week. And I did, but it's like this thing in the back of your mind where you're like, this problem is huge and I can't do it by myself, and just people of color can't fix this problem by ourselves. Everyone needs to be aware of, needs to just make an effort to be socially aware and ask questions and educate themselves. And in the future, I would like to see non-people of color, white people, seek out resources and educate themselves, seek out education in these things when you don't know, rather than just finding that one person of color that you feel comfortable talking to be the end all be all to all your answers. Faculty was told about it, and there was space for discussion, and I did have a voice there because they made space for one, and I felt listened to, and I was given options and asked what I wanted to do about this. And the one major thing that made all the difference was just having someone pause and say, what would you like to do about it? And hearing me out, rather than assuming what I want.